Good day, grade 10s. Welcome to this business studies lesson on presenting business information. It's on chapter 3.6 in your textbooks, and this chapter mainly has three parts to it. The first part is presenting business reports. The next part is verbal presentations, and the third part is visual aids. Now, in this presentation, hopefully in about 10 minutes, we're quickly going to go through all the important questions. Now, luckily, this is a short chapter, and this chapter basically has 8 questions. The first question is to discuss the importance of business reports or presentations. The second one is guidelines onto writing an effective report. And then, lastly, to explain the importance, advantages and disadvantages of graphs, symbols, and pictures. The next part is verbal presentations. Discuss the steps for preparing a verbal presentation, which is one of our core questions. Advise the business on how to prepare for support materials on a presentation. And that's the only 2 questions on verbal presentations. And then the last 3 questions is to explain the purpose of audiovisual aids, identify those audiovisual aids from given scenarios, and explain factors that must be considered when designing a presentation. Now, just lastly, this specific chapter is very important for grade 11, so please let's get the foundation of this correct for next year as well. If we continue onwards, you guys will see, this is our textbook again. The first part is to present business reports, and this business report, the first question there is to discuss the importance of business reports or presentations. Now, there is where this is the content material then, and you guys will have to read with me here. It starts with, they say, managers often have to present business reports to the stakeholders. The reports can be about the financial position of the firm, sales, marketing, production, or turnaround strategies. This information will assist management when they need to make decisions, such as employment equity reports, weaknesses, and strength of the business. It is extremely important for entrepreneurs to develop a business plan and present it to potential investors or financial institutions to raise startup capital. Business reports can be used to turn business information into tables and charts, for example, cash flow statements, etc. Now, the next question is the guidelines on writing an effective business report. Business report can range from a half a page to 100-page plus financial forecast. Now, that is the report that we have there. Written reports may be presented orally to a group or electronically on a computer screen. The reports can be delivered and presented electronically in a PDF format or using software programs like PowerPoint. Right. So that is the basics of guidelines to writing an effective business report. If we have a look over here, you guys will see that the next question is to explain the importance, advantages, and disadvantages of graphs, diagrams, symbols, and pictures. And this is a few of the most important graphs. Please have a look. You'll see we have over here, the first one is a bar graph. We have the advantages and disadvantages and what the picture looks like. Okay. The next one is a pie chart. The advantages, disadvantages, and what the diagram looks like. At the top, we have our line graph, the advantages, disadvantages, and then exactly what the line graph looks like. Now, these these types of graphs you should quickly run through, but luckily there's not a lot of content there. Now, this brings us to the second part of the business presentation. That is called the verbal presentation, and this is now, as I said, one of our core questions. We start off with an outline or discuss the steps for preparing a verbal presentation. Step 1, define the purpose. Step 2, gather content and presentation ideas. Step 3, organize the subject matter. Step 3, decide how to present it. Step 5, prepare the presentation. And step 6, practice, practice, practice. Brings us to step 7, plan, experience and control the environment. Now, I've quickly gone through the steps with you guys, but under each step there's a bit of an explanation. Now, luckily they won't ask you to discuss individual steps. So this question can be asked, let's say, for 14 marks, if you have to quickly and briefly discuss the steps, but they can maybe ask you for a bit more detail. So you need to at least study 2 or 3 bullets under each of these steps. Okay. Then it brings us to the next question, where they ask advice or give advice to the business, advise the business on how to prepare for support material for presentation. Now, there we have a couple of things. The one is handouts. The handouts is normally a piece of paper that have information on them. Very handy in certain settings. Transparencies. Now this is a very old technology. Sometimes it's still used on overhead projectors, but you guys need to know what those are about. Slides. There was this old technology that you had photographic slides, but these days it's all used in PowerPoint slides. Okay. Then we have charts. Another way to illustrate data or information. And then lastly, models, which is normally a scaled down smaller version of something bigger, like you have maybe in an EGD class, like a bridge or something like that. If we continue onwards, we start with the third part of the chapter, which talks about audio-visual aids. Now this is very important. This content comes directly from the grade 12 textbook. Okay, so they are looking at different audio-visual aids. The first audio-visual aid that they're looking at is a PowerPoint slide, and then they discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of PowerPoints or slides. Okay, now it is important for you to at least study 3 of the advantages and 3 of the disadvantages. Obviously, I want you to read through the rest and get the full picture, but when it comes to study purposes, I can't see that they will ask more than 3 advantages or 3 disadvantages at a time. Now, this goes the same for an overhead projector or transparencies, as we've discussed before. Handouts, flyers, brochures, we've looked at that briefly. Interactive whiteboards, smart boards, and so forth. If we on the page, we have flip charts, whiteboards, those whiteboards that we have on at school, or those paper whiteboards that you flip over, and then lastly posters, banners, signs or flags, and each of them have advantages and disadvantages. The next question brings us to identifying these audiovisual aids from given scenarios. Now, again, they give you a little bit of a scenario over there, and then they will ask you for the visual aid. To identify the aid, explain how it's used, and then maybe recommend how you can design it into a presentation. The last question that we're looking at for the chapter is to explain the factors that must be considered when designing a presentation. Things like font size, start with the text, simple language, logical order, limit the information on a slide. Again, there's a lot of content there. Luckily not long sentences, but you will have to make the distinction. And this brings us to the end of the chapter.